This is a discussion or presentation on raising our families within our means, and it's obviously about financial management with some thoughts towards how to best utilize the resources that you have. So how many of you here, by show of hands, think that you're pretty good at financial management and you can make good decisions in general, whether it's buying a car, house, credit card use? How many of you think you're on your way, successful? You have a credit score of somewhere in the vicinity of 2,000 or something, whatever the highest is. I don't pay attention. So that's good. There's a few of you. Most didn't raise your hand. So I'm going to try to do this quickly, but if I feel like there's a lot of engagement, I'll stop. But otherwise, we'll just sort of do a lot of interaction this way by show of hands. So pay attention. I'll ask a question, and then you'll have to raise your hand to answer that. So the clicker is this one. Right? Did it move? I can't see. Did it go? I can't see anything. Oh, there, okay. So I need to, nope. All right, there we go. All right, so the first thing is I just want to get some assumptions out of the way. The fact that you're sitting here does not mean that you need help in managing finances. And secondly, just because I'm giving this presentation doesn't mean that I know everything about finances either. So let's get that out of the way. Another one is that this is not about chanda. So this is not like, at the end of the day, we expect you to, give more chanda. But that's an important aspect of it. And the last thing is that a lot of people think financial management is actually easy when it's not. I mean, if you have, a lot of wealth, then you can make a lot of mistakes and get away with it. But if you're living on a tight budget, one mistake can actually be very costly. And there are things that you don't even have control over that can ruin not only your credit, but in some cases your life. So it's important to actually pay attention to these things. So the first, what we're going to basically talk about is how to be more knowledgeable about financial decisions. What factors matter, how you can make those decisions, what to look for, small tidbits. And I think you'll find a few things that you may not be aware of, even those of you who raised your hands. When it comes to certain decision points, we sometimes base them on intuition, and our intuition is often not correct. So ultimately, the goal is to be a good, better consumer and live within your means. So there's a well-known game. It's called the Monty Hall game. It's an old game. How many of you know this game, Monty Hall game? It's actually there's a Monty Hall show back in the 60s, so that's our age, right? Not my age, hopefully. Anyway, so no one knows this, right? Good. This is good. So can we go to this website? So we're going to play this in real time, this game, and we're going to do this by show of hands, okay? So this will be, hopefully, if it works, it'll be interesting. So it's a game of probability, a little bit. So as a host, there are 3 doors there, door 1, 2, and 3. One of them has a valuable prize, like a car or something, sports car, worth a lot of money. The other 2 have goats, okay? So not worth a lot of money, except they didn't know that in our culture, goats are valued. So, just because the goat doesn't mean it's valuable, it's not valuable. So one of those doors has the valuable prize, okay? So based on odds, does it matter which door you pick, or what's the odds of winning in that case? Simple math. What's the probability of winning the car if you have 3 doors to choose from, 3 guesses? 1/3, right? 1 in 3, okay? So let's do that. So which door do you want to select? And what's going to happen is we're going to select one door, and it's going to expose where one of the goats is, and then we'll have a chance to do it again. So we're going to do this by show of raise of hands. How many want door number 1? And it'll be rough, okay? 2? Who wants 2? And who wants door 3? We should have picked 3 because this is 1 out of 313, right? 3 or 1, right? Anyway. So let's go with, I think I saw 1 was the most, so let's go with number 1. It doesn't matter, it could have been anything. So click on number 1, and number 1 happens, okay, so the middle one is the goat, okay? So now we know the car is either in 1 or 2, in the 3 spot, okay? So 2 is definitely out of the picture. You have a choice now, okay, to either keep number 1, which is what we selected, or we can switch to number 3. How many of you, by a show of raise of hands, and try to participate in this, more hands, like I should see 100% of hands to go up at one point or the other. How many of you feel like it doesn't matter whether you stay on 1 or 3 because the odds are 1 out of 3? How many think it doesn't matter? Okay. How many think it does matter if you switch? Okay, so, okay, that's interesting because usually it's the other way around. But, okay, so how many want to keep, show of hands, how many want to keep the door number 1? Okay, how many want to switch to door number 3? Wow, so I think 1 was a little bit more. So let's go with, we're going to stick with number 1, see what happens. So click on number 1, and it's a goat, okay? And if you look at the results at the bottom, I don't know if you can see it, but if you look at the results, if you switch, the chance of winning is much higher than if you stay on the original door, okay? And that's actually statistically proven. And when this thing was came out in the 60s, or I think it was early 70s, a lot of statisticians, PhDs, argued this. They said, no way, this is a simple probability, 1 out of 3. But then someone actually wrote a paper explaining why it makes sense to switch in that situation. So the idea of this one is, can we go back to the presentation? So the idea is basically sometimes our intuition fails us. We think we know something, but in reality, by having that knowledge, we actually know we can make better decisions. So again, I'm going to try to go fast just because of time, but the question was, what can we learn from this game? And I'm just going to answer those. So I mentioned the intuition, right? Our intuition isn't always right. Like I said, in reality, both statistically and common sense, if you logically think about it, it makes sense to switch. And why does this matter, right? It matters because knowledge is important. Now that you know this fact, next time if you're playing this game, you'll have a better chance of winning the car. And so the last point is that don't be afraid of gaining knowledge because it can only help you. There's no harm in knowledge, okay? So we move on to the next one. So how many of you know Daniel Kahneman? He's almost like a Desi name, Kahneman. So he was actually a pretty interesting character. He won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002. But the interesting thing was he never had formal education in economics, but he was a psychologist, a PhD psychologist. And he came up with, he's known as the father of behavioral economics. And one of his theory was that it's called prospect theory. The idea is that, and it's true, you can apply this in your life, and most people who are successful they go in the reverse order, but those of us who just stay standard, like stay consistent, we go with this theory, which is that we're risk averse when it comes to gains, and when it comes to losses, we seek risk, okay? Again, we're going to do an exercise, okay? We're going to play a game called heads or tails, okay? If it's heads, let's say you call heads, right? As an audience, you call heads, you win $2,500. If it's tails, you owe me $500, okay? So if you look at the two, how many of you would agree to play that game? I mean, aside from the fact that there might be some gambling here, but just how many of you would agree to play that game? Okay, I see like 5. How many would you say, no, that 500 possibility of loss is too much for me? How many of you? So a lot more hands went up for negative, right? Like you wouldn't play that game. And that's what that theory is saying, that people are risk averse when it comes to gains. But if you think about it, you have a 50% chance of getting $2,500 versus losing 500. And the probability, what's called the utility value of the 2,500 is much higher. So again, the intuition factor that comes in, and people who are successful, they go with we say successful in life, right? Like the go-getters, right? The alpha dogs, as they're called. They go with the opposite approach. When it comes to risk, they take risk. They take risk after risk after risk. And because all it takes is one right bet, if you will, and you're going to win the big prize. Okay, so again, just wanted to give you some idea of why behavioral economics matters. The other theory that he came up with was, and he actually, this is well known in anyone who's taken economics knows this. This is the idea that people make intuitively. Their intuition is to actually not make irrational decisions. Okay, so for example, have the example there. If it was going to take you 20 minutes to save $10 on a $40 item, would you do it? How many of you would spend 20 minutes to save $10 on a $40 item? So in other words, you go from one store to the other store to save $10 on the same item. Okay, a few hands. How many of you would do the same thing for a $400 item? So you're going to save $15 on a $400 item. About the same, okay. But in reality, so he was a psychologist, what he found was that most people will not worry about the $15 because they think percentage-wise, it's too low. But think about your wallet. What's coming out of your wallet or what's going into your wallet? It's actually the $5, right? 15 versus 10. So it's always better to do that. But what studies after studies have shown that people will not worry about, they will look at the percentage and not the actual amount. So just some background information. We'll get into some more of these. So we did, so I'm behind, I think. Right, so again, it's all about knowledge, knowing how to make decisions. So there's a concept in economics called micro and macroeconomics, right? So microeconomics is what you do, right? Whether you choose to, spend your money on lunch, buy a house, car, whatever. Those are all the decisions that you have control over. And there's the macroeconomics, which is you have no control over, which is things like interest rates, economy, the price of housing, and so forth. So you really don't have control over that. And the interesting thing is that they both impact each other. So your decision to purchase a house, a house for $200,000 or $500,000 or $1 million has an impact on the macroeconomy and vice versa. So when interest rates are high, for example, people tend to buy lower value homes and vice versa. So there is a relationship there. But what's interesting is, why should we care about these things? The reason, and we'll cover this later on, there's a whole field of economics that says that microeconomics doesn't really matter. Whatever you decide to do, today, buy a utility car versus luxury car, big home, small home, whatever you want to do, doesn't matter because the macroeconomics will always fail you. It'll only help like the tiny percent that we call the 1%, right? The 1% always get, or another way to look at it is the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And that's the reason why, because the macroeconomics doesn't allow most people to ride the wave. And we'll see why that is later on. All right, next. Okay, so now we're going to do a little bit more. So I'm going to, if you want to come to the mic, maybe like 3 speakers, firstly, that come here. The question is, why is financial management so difficult? Or if you think, you can either argue that it's not difficult. So first 3 people, quick 30-second responses as to why you think it is or it isn't difficult. Is it on? I think so.
No, you turned it off.
So your 30 seconds are up, sorry. See, macroeconomics, sometimes you have no control. The big government takes over, makes decisions for you. I didn't say that. I didn't hear it. I didn't say it. I didn't laugh. I was laughing at something else. Next comment. In case you didn't hear it, his comment was because wives control our purses, basically, our wallets.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Hamid Malik from Dallas, Texas. I noticed I was trying to be successful, but it is very difficult because the decision you make, you're always into dark cloud. You don't know what you're really doing. You have to acquire knowledge, and there is so much confusion that you don't know it is true or not. So only people in the world who are successful, they are on a very, very high level, and they probably control the whole world, So it's not possible for a small guy to be successful. Thank you.
Exactly. So his point, in case you didn't hear it, is as a individual, life is stacked against you. Whatever decision, one false decision basically ruins you. Whereas people at the top, CEOs, VPs of big corporations, they can literally steal money from people and still get a golden parachute. Sorry for anyone who's in business, but that's somewhat of the reality.
My name is Mubashar Ahmed. I am from Detroit.
Micromanagement is very difficult as compared to macromanagement, because macromanagement, when you buy a house or car, you find out how much you have money and what is the interest rate and how you will pay it. But micromanagement, your children's spending and you don't have control.
Exactly. Last comment.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ahmad Hadi. I don't find, I've been married to for 54 years to the same young lady, and been living in the same house for 47 years. And I don't find it difficult for me financially, because I don't go above my means.
Right.
I've been staying in the same.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, you stay within your means. I'm drawing a blank on the name. It'll come to me as soon as I get to the next point. But never mind. I'll skip that point. But speaking of homes, there are people who have a lot of money, but they don't necessarily, move from home to home. So I'm going to go. You're testing the volume. Okay. So let's actually see if I can go to the next slide. Okay. Yeah. So the big factor is that we live in a consumer economy, right? What happened after 9/11, right? What was the message from the government? Spend, right? Don't worry about what's happening around you. Spend, credit card, so forth. So our economy relies on you, the consumer. It doesn't matter what macro level policies are made, but if you're not spending, the country's in trouble. So that's one problem. And so how do they make you do that? They entice you by giving you access to free credit, right? Like, low interest rates, and then all of a sudden, 12 months later, or 2 years later, you're getting slammed, and then you're having a hard time. Of course, it keeps on encouraging increase of goods and services. And the other problem is it leads to inflation bubbles, which many people don't realize, that every time the house value goes up or something, we feel good. Oh, my house value went up by $50,000, but so did everyone else's, which means that there was inflation, and that $50,000 really isn't worth $50,000 that you thought it was, because now when you go to buy something that you thought you could buy with 50, you can't anymore, right? So that's the other problem. And the side effect of that is the bubble economy that we live in. So we keep seeing these bubbles, whether it's in the stock market or in the housing or some other sector. There's always these sort of cyclical events that happen. And the last thing is that the other thing around this is that if it's a consumer economy, it's unsustainable, because what does it mean? It means you need to have a sort of a fresh supply of consumers all the time buying new and new things, and at the end of the day, it's not, and that's why you have these crashes. So there's actually even term for people. Some people actually can't help it. They need that, sort of the high, if you will, the thrill of shopping. And you see this in mass media all the time, movies, television shows, storylines, and so forth. The term called retail therapy, that if you're in a bad mood or if you're feeling depressed, go buy something, right? And that's actually, it's proven psychologically, scientifically, that when you make a certain purchase, you feel good about it temporarily. As soon as you bring it home, and then what happens? You have buyer's remorse, right? Like, oh, why did I buy this thing? I don't even use this thing, or whatever. And there's actually a term. There's actually, just like for any kind of addictive behavior, there's a term called oniomania. That means you just can't help yourself, and you just compulsively buy things. So hopefully no one's in that boat. Okay, so the next thing is, what is the impact of mismanaging? I think somehow I got cut off, but I think that the actual thing is, what are some of the impacts of not managing your personal finances? So maybe first three if you want to, otherwise I'll just move on. Anyone? Consequences of not managing finances correctly. Do you have a point? One quick point, and then I'll give you my 2 cents.
Hamid Malik from Dallas, Texas. If you don't have a financial manager, you probably end up losing the money because of your bad choices. So I always have to have some professional, just like a lawyer and doctor. You need a financial advisor, and you work with him. If you're not satisfied, he will come up with some other solution. Thank you.
All right.
Assalamu alaikum. Abdul Kareem from Chicago, Majlis. I think that really you yourself have to educate yourself according to your means. And if you don't do that, then what happens is that, like you were saying, to buy something, you feel good, but the point of it is that I had a situation whereby I had to tell the person that I was going to borrow some money from, I don't need you for that. Mm-hmm. So you have to realize what you're doing, and that way, you will not get in trouble.
Right. So I think it's pretty intuitive. Maybe, hopefully no one's in that situation, but there's a lot of impact of financial mismanagement. So number one, nowadays employers, because employers are always looking for a reason to eliminate employees, right? So if you have bad credit or if you made a bad financial decision, that can impact your employment. It certainly impact your financial growth, right? If you make a bad investment, bad decision, you buy a car that you can't afford, and all of a sudden now you've got liens against it. The situation can explode immediately. Marriage, we're talking about families. Marriages suffer when people make bad financial decisions. So you need to keep, that's a huge factor. And kids observe the parents' behavior, right? We just saw the previous presentation as well, that kids are always watching you. And so when you make these kind of bad choices, they're going to, number one, be less forgiving, and number two, they'll do the same thing, and they won't care. We'll talk about this later, some examples. And then, of course, it causes stress, right? And increase of stress, decrease of happiness, which leads to other problems. It's not just marriage. There's a whole spectrum of bad behavior that results in stress, high stress. And then also Jamaat engagement too, right? So, and people say, like, what does that mean, Jamaat engagement? Well, if you're stressed out, if you're always trying to work, try to get that extra dollar or something because you need that, then you're not really engaged in the Jamaat, which ultimately means you're not really connected to Khilafat, which we know that can lead to other problems. So that's another factor. And the other thing is that in this crowd, a lot of baby boomers. How many of you are not baby boomers? Or how many of you know who baby boomers are? But so baby boomers are basically in their mid-60s and higher, and or mid-60s to mid-70s, and they account for half of all bankruptcies in the U.S. And there's a reason for that, because they, up until that point, they didn't realize the decisions they were making were going to impact them at that age, and all of a sudden they hit that age where they typically don't have a job anymore, and the retirement fund or whatever public assistance they're getting isn't enough, and so they have to go down this route. So the next thing is we're going to do a right. Okay. So how can you? So the easiest thing is, well, I can increase my income, right? So if I can't control my expenses, well, then I'll just increase my income because that'll help offset that thing. So can you increase your income is the question, right? And so there's two ways to look at this, right? It's very difficult once you're in a profession and you've sort of reached your max capacity. It's really difficult to increase your income, just because the way that management works is that they pick you out early on in your career, like your management quality, your upper management quality, your this or that, and by the time you've spent like 5-10 years in a company, you've pretty much reached your max capacity, and that includes your income as well. So unless you hit the lottery or something, which I don't recommend, because that's a bad financial decision, your income is really tough to increase. You could increase it by some other means, and I think I don't have a slide, but what's like maybe 2 or 3, what's one thing that you can do to increase your income if you feel that you can? If you feel you can increase your income, you can't. Anyone want to take a stab at, or? Second job. Second job, right? That's one way to do it, which has impact on your other lifestyle, right? Stress and fatigue and so forth, your family life. You're not watching, your kids, you're not there around your kids. Quickly.
Yeah, a lot of people I saw, they are disabled, they are on wheelchair, they are making money on eBay.
Okay, so selling stuff on eBay. In fact, this was news to me. When I moved to Los Angeles, I noticed that on eBay you can actually find sand from Malibu and Santa Monica and these famous beaches. So a jar of sand from these famous beaches can fetch for like 10, 12, $20. So if you're really determined, that's something you can get into. But I think we all realize that, and those of us actually, me included, we realize that we reach our max earning capacity at some level, and we're struggling to just keep up with inflation, 2%, 3%, if we're lucky, 5%, maybe a bonus here and there. So the best thing is either to be a physician or in business, be some sort of a tycoon on Wall Street. But all doctors, whenever I talk to doctors, they always say, no, there's no more money in medicine either. Just don't worry about that factor. But so the point is, don't count on the fact that you can increase your income, so therefore you can increase your expenses. Oftentimes what happens is people buy something more than they can afford in the hopes that next year I'll get a raise, or next year I can switch jobs and make an extra bonus or something like that. And that's when people get in trouble, because they make these assumptions that that are very difficult to come true. So next we're going to play a little bit game, which right. So I think we all know this, right? Wants versus needs. So a need is something you have to have, right? So what's a need right now for you? For me, for example, right now, sleep is a need for me, because I've been awake for more than 24 hours without sleep. So sleep is absolutely a must for me. Otherwise, there's a good probability I'm just going to fall here. But what are some? I kind of joke. I think a couple laughed. Hopefully, what are some needs? Like in reality, what are some needs that you I think you know it, but just to get you going here. Clothing, housing, right? Food, right?
Health is number one.
Health, right? Of course, healthy body. Right, so I think we recognize that without this, survival is a factor, right? So anything to do with survival is considered a need. What's a want?
Good to have. It is good to have.
Right. You would like to have, right? Right. Luxury cars, right? A big McMansion. You know what I just realized? You know what a want is? A subsidy for travel to the Ijtema. Just kidding. Just kidding. Sorry. It's a need, right? Well, we're going to get to that. We're going to see, what the perspective. So who knows what that is? I think that we have a physician sitting here who knows what that car is. It's a what? Bugatti, right? So it's a very expensive car, is all I know, okay? Who knows what it goes for? How much? So about $2 million for that car, right? 2 million, not billion, million, okay, with an M. One car, $2 million. Hopefully I don't know what the insurance on that would be, but anyway. How many think it's a need or a want? I mean, it should be obvious, but how many think it's a need? How many think it's a need? Okay, how many think it's a want? One person thinks it's a need. That's. And of course, I can argue that it's a need because maybe I have some sort of a psychological disorder that without this car, I'm not going to survive, okay? So, it's potentially a need as well. This is the latest, I think it's the latest iPhone 7. Came out, I think, last week or something. Is need or a want? Want, see? But I can, if I were to actually do a survey here, if I were to actually look at phones in the next month or so, many of you would have this phone because we feel like it's something that we need to have because it's got the latest, graphics card on it, or more memory. I can text more quickly. I can, ask Siri a lot more questions and, be more productive. You always find justification for buying something like this. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, it's a want, but people can argue, that, hey, this thing is so productive that it's a need for me, and that's fair enough. What was that? You can. Well, that's the other one. That's the Note 7, which I don't have, thankfully. I am a Samsung guy, though. Okay, what's this? What car is this? Tesla, right? It's a California thing. Is that a need or a want?
It's a need.
All right, we're gonna say this. Okay, how many think it's a need? Say need. Need. How many think it's a want? See, it's 50-50, right? And why is it 50-50? It's 50-50 because it's your perspective, right? Some people can argue that, I'm paying a premium for that car, but it's much more productive. It's got self-drive mode in it. I can be stuck in traffic for 2 hours. It doesn't matter because I can still, be logged into work and do, whatever it is. I can still call my wife and tell her that I love her or something. I don't know. For 2 hours, I don't know. Whatever. You do something, right? You can do something more productive. Talk to your kids while you're stuck in traffic, right? You can do all that because it's got some very nice features in it. But someone who can't afford it, can barely afford a utility car, for them it's obviously not a need. It's a want because hopefully they're not stuck in traffic 2 hours. Okay, so next one this should be. What about this? Need or want? So we'll do this again, right? How many think it's a need? Say need if you think it's a need. Say want if you think it's a want. Okay, well, on I think a hot summer day when you're really dehydrated and need some sugar, maybe it's a need, right? Today is a good day for it to be a need. So the point of this is that, it's easy to say in our heads, like if you ask someone, what the difference between need and want is? Yeah, I know what a need is, I know what a want is, but the question is, when you're in that situation, when you're making that purchase, do you ask yourself, is it a need or a want? Because I can tell you, almost everyone here has a probably less than a year-old phone, and I know myself, I do this all the time just because I get that high of getting a new device, but then literally 3 hours, 4 hours later, I'm like, this is it, this is the new phone, and a new cracked screen 2 weeks later. So we make these irrational decisions all the time, and it's really a matter of perspective. And if you think you can afford to make that mistake, then you make that mistake and you move on. Or you can afford to have that rush for whatever $1,000, whatever this phone costs. What about this? These are books. I couldn't find a good graphic. Books. Need or want? Need. How many think it's a need? Say need. How many think it's a want? Okay, so it's a 50-50 again. And I think the reason, those of you who said it's a want, is probably because you think, well, I can download something online for free. I can hack, I know all these free sites. But the reality is, books, I think, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, technical, I like to consider need because, they help you sort of balance out other things in your life. So reading books is important. The good news is that all the books of the Jamaat books are, Al-Islam at least, they're all free, so that part is covered. All right, so, okay, this is another one. How many of these are there? Okay, 2 more. This is a big house, need or want. So how many think it's a want? So say want if you think it's a want. Want. How many think it's a need? Need. So want wins that one. Again, I can make the argument, maybe I'm living with my in-laws, and my in-laws are 8 siblings and grandchildren, whatever, right? And maybe this is the perfect, because we all get along with each other. We love spending our time in this one unit, one house, and maybe that's the case, and it's worth it. But and then one more, and then I think it's a computer. How many think it's a need? How many think it's a want? So how many think it's a need? How many think it's a want? Okay, because you think why? Why is it a want? Because you can do everything on paper? On your cell phone, right? Okay. Yeah, so you can, exactly. See, it's a matter of perspective, right? If all you're doing is browsing the web, email, things like that, then your phone is good enough. But if you're actually doing something more productive than just email, maybe editing videos and things like that, you need this, right? So it's just a matter of perspective. Okay. So I think everyone has seen this, and I won't go into too much, but this is called the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He was a psychologist as well. And he came up with this hierarchy. He said, okay, at the bottom, we talked about this, right? At the bottom, the humans are motivated by physiological needs, okay? We talked about this, right? What are physiological needs? Housing, food, that kind of water, sleep, all those things that you must have to survive. But then you go up further, and you go up the sort of hierarchy, you get safety, you want a nice, secure house, you want a nice, safety car, all that stuff. Then it actually gets interesting. Now it's no longer about physical needs. Now it gets into love and belonging, right? You're motivated to do something for your friends, your family, because you want them to recognize you, that you are a great person, or you exist basically. Because up until this point, it's been about physical needs. Then it goes to esteem, right? This is where now it's about, hey, what am I worth, right? You know, my presentation is so well liked that only 25% of the people left, something like that. I don't know, it's a joke. And then it gets to self-actualization, which is kind of the, you know, we talked about sort of, this is more like a, almost, bring a blank again, lack of sleep. So this is where you actually, you know, realize about your own self, like what am I really worth, right? I mean, it's no longer about what others think of me, but what am I really, you know, you start thinking, what is the meaning of life? Am I really fulfilling the meaning of life, right? So it's interesting that Allah Ta'ala says that, you know, I've created man to worship me, but man doesn't recognize that part or doesn't realize that until he's attained everything. But Allah Ta'ala has given us that command, you know, for us as Muslims. We know that what we have to do, you know, in our life to make something more meaningful. All right, so that's, so again, I think time is running short, but marketers know this, right? So this is a field that's studied very extensively, and marketers know this sort of psychological thing. So what do you think they do to make someone buy that Bugatti or, you know, whatever the Tesla was, or whatever the McMansion? What do they make you realize? You need it, right? They say, you know what? This guy who's got an income of this much, works here, blah, 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 make him realize he needs to have that thing. Because without it, his life isn't worth it. Without it, he can't reach that self-realization level. And so, you know, so they push that on you. And you know that, right? Because telemarketers don't call us to buy a Lamborghini, right? They call us to buy a cell phone service or, you know, buy an encyclopedia or whatever. I don't know. I don't answer my phone if I don't know who it is. So, so I apologize for those of you who may have called me and I didn't respond. It's because I just don't answer my phone most of the time. So that's something you have to realize, that whenever you're being, you know, push something, these guys are smart. They know that when they push you something, that you're going to pay attention to that. And it's not. I mean, most of the times sometimes you might ignore it because you're smart, but you know the reality. But a lot of times we fall for that and we go after that. So the other problem that we have is there's other factors that influence what we you know, how we like to spend money. So one of the things is cultural, right? So in our culture, and it's true in most cultures, but I feel it's true in probably Muslim cultures, buying gifts for friends, right? In this culture, it's true around Christmas time, right? What happens? Everyone's stressed out, right? Because they have to buy the gift for everyone, their, you know, neighbor to boss and, you know, employees, whatever, right? They have to buy these gifts. And it's because it's a cultural thing, and you know, that's how they feel connected. And we do the same thing. And one thing that always, I won't get into it, but my wife annoys me a lot because whenever we host a dinner, it's like a whole day production where you have to have like 10 dishes and, you know, like every kind of variety of meat that you can think of. And it's like, at the end of the day, you know, no matter how many guests there are, they can only eat so much, and then you have all this food that's left over, and then, you know, then I'm forced to eat it, then I get a big belly, and then I complain, and, you know, it becomes into a longer conversation. But it's okay. After 16 years of marriage, I've accepted it. When she says we're going to host a dinner, I'm like, okay, you know, let's go buy whatever you want to buy, and I just keep quiet. But that's, you know, it is what it is. Then there's social pressure, right? So if your friends drive luxury cars, guess what? You're going to end up driving a luxury car. If your friends drive utility cars, I drive a 2006 Prius, okay? And that's because in my circle of friends, everyone has like a Camry or, you know, I think the most expensive car someone has is a Audi, which is, you know, comparable, so it's not that bad. But if you're in that sort of rat race or, you know, keeping up with the Joneses, you're gonna fall for that. Apple products, sorry, that was a dig on Apple because, you know, I'm a Samsung guy. So I feel like those people who buy Apple products, they do it because they feel like, oh, you know, if I don't have this, people will think I'm not cool enough. And then there's also this like personal factor, like age and profession, lifestyle, and so forth. So, you know, of course, you know, many of us may go through a midlife crisis. And what do, right? We go buy an expensive car, maybe a second wife, hopefully not. Bad jokes, man. I feel like I'm at a roast and no one's laughing. Oh, That wasn't captured, right? It can be edited out. A physician has to have a luxury car, right? And because that's everyone around them drives it. That's their lifestyle, right? They have to maintain, and you want to. Like as a physician, I can justify it. I can say, you know what? I want to maintain a certain level of dignity among my patients, right? They should realize I'm a successful physician. Because if I'm driving a Yaris, I think it's like a low-end car. I think Yaris. They're going to think I'm not a good physician because I'm really struggling financially, right? So you can always justify those kind of purchases. Okay, so these are real ads actually. The one on your left is an ad from I think in the 50s. They're actually promoting Coca-Cola for babies. They're saying it's a healthy product for babies, and the question they're asking is, how quickly should you start giving them Coca-Cola? And this is a real ad, okay? On the right is a little bit of an ad from India. I just happened to find it funny. It's an ad for hair growth, and I just like the before and after picture. I don't know why he has more hair on his nose than anywhere else, but I think it's meant to be a mustache. Anyway, but the point is that now, both those ads are targeting a certain market, right? In India, they're targeting a certain type of consumer with a certain type of income, so they're going after some natural, miracle growth. In America, they do the same thing, but they make it sound like it's scientific and blah blah blah. But as you can see with the Coke ad, it's not always based on real science. Okay, so what is the answer, right? And I've got like 10 minutes, so I got to really wrap it up here, or really move fast. So Allah Ta'ala says, and those the true servants of God are those who, when they spend, are neither extravagant nor niggardly, but moderate between the two, and the bounty of thy Lord proclaim. So Allah Ta'ala doesn't say be stingy, okay? That's not the point. Every decision shouldn't be like, do I really need this or do I want this, right? That's not the point. But the point is you should, based on your means, you should adopt the middle path. So if you can stretch your budget and get that Bugatti or whatever that car was, don't do it. But if you're a billionaire and $2 million to you is like the middle of the road, then by all means buy it and give it to me. I'll take it. And buy insurance and everything else that comes with it for me as well. So that's the main point. Okay, so now I'm going to, unfortunately, I guess I didn't judge this correctly. So no magic bullet, right? So the point here is that spending should be a function of your income, but it's often not, because that's why we get in trouble with the credit. You shouldn't be spending more than you have. But there's sort of catch-22, if you will. So you have two options. Either you spend less or you make more income, right? But the reality is that earning more is much more difficult than you realize, and spending less is also much more difficult than you realize. So in some respects, you're kind of caught between the two, between a rock and a hard place. So not easy. And this is basically showing you nominal income versus cost of living. So on the left side is, you can't really see it, but the point here is the red line, which is on top, is the cost of living, and the blue line or green line is your income growth, right? In the US, since 2008, the cost of living has gone up, whereas income has basically stayed below that, right? And that's an issue, right? Because if you want to maintain your lifestyle, you have to increase your income, and which, as you can see, data-wise, it's not possible. So another key term is discretionary income. I think we all know it. It's basically how much money do you have left after all your mandatory, your required expenses. That's including taxes, rents, and all that stuff. And what's interesting is that this study was done about 10 years ago, in the late 90s, so about 20 years ago. And they chose, I think it was Phoenix or Tucson, I think somewhere in Arizona. They selected a town in Arizona or city in Arizona, and they said, how do you maximize happiness? And what they realized was that if you make an income of around 80,000, that's the peak of your happiness. In other words, if you make less than 80,000, you're less happy. But as you make more than 80,000, you become less happy again. So your sort of curve falls after $80,000. Maybe it's a bit more than that now. And the reason is because the more money you make after a certain point, after you sort of fulfill your basic needs, you keep chasing that next high, right? Okay, I've got the Acura, I want the Mercedes. I've got the Mercedes, I want the Maserati or whatever the next higher class thing. I've got the 3-bedroom home, I need the 4-bedroom home, right? So you start to always stretch your thoughts. So that's the danger zone you get into. So again, I'm going to go this quickly because I got 2 slides at the end that I must cover. General tips, don't fall for get-rich-quick schemes, okay? We all do it, right? If I come to you, if you know me, let's say you know me as a brother, as a friend, I come to you and say, look, I've got this great opportunity to invest, and it's only going to be 3% guaranteed. You give me $20,000 today, I'll give you 3% back in 6 months. Don't do it. There's no such thing as a guaranteed investment, okay? Don't fall for that. Same thing, don't fall for can't-miss schemes. Even if someone is showing you on paper that, look, I've got 6% gains every quarter, he's Bernie Madoff, basically, right? He's lying to you. Because if anyone could guarantee anything, they'd be legitimately a billionaire right now. Always compare prices, obviously, that makes sense. Go that extra mile, right? We talked about that $10 versus $15 savings. Always try to go for the $15 savings. And then obviously cheapest and always best. Make budgets for everything, okay? So if you're in financial difficulty, make budget and use cash. Don't use credit card. Because when you go to the grocery store and you see, I want this, I can eat this, I can eat this. But if you only use cash, you're limited to what you're going to buy, and make a list of things that you're going to buy. And reduce gradually, right? Don't go home and say, okay, that's it, I'm going to slash everything off my table. You're going to fail in doing that as well. And obviously focus on the big picture. Think 2 or 3 years from now what it is that you want to do. So I was going to do this exercise with good deal, bad deal, but we can't do it now. Time is I think I've got 10 minutes, 5, 6, how much?
Yeah, we have about 15 minutes.
Oh, 15, okay. Well, then in that case, we can do this deal, okay. So this is good. Free laptop, so you walk into Best Buy or your local technology store and you see this thing, it says free laptop with smartphone purchase and 2-year commitment. Show of hands, how many think it's a good deal? You get a free laptop. How many think it's a good deal? How many think it's a bad deal? Free laptop with a 2-year, okay. And I think those of you, if we had time, I would have asked those who thought it was a good deal, why you think. But I think those of you thought that it was a bad deal, I think I know why. Number one, you're going to pay more in that commitment price than the laptop is worth. And secondly, you don't know what that laptop is. That could be like a 5-year-old laptop that's been sitting there, and they've just said, okay, let's just give it away with this. And remember, marketers are smart. They've done the research. They know how to. They don't have this ad in Apple stores, right? Why? Because an Apple consumer is typically more wealthy, and they don't care. They don't fall for these kind of gimmicks. But you walk into sort of like a Walmart. I mean, I'm not saying if you shop at Walmart, you're not a good consumer, but they know who's going to fall for this, and typically it's the lower end consumers that fall for this. There was actually, in 30-second, 10 years ago, not Expedia, one of these online sites, online travel sites, they were caught actually doing this. Once they realized that you were browsing from a Mac computer, they jacked up the price versus if you were on a PC, okay? And in their defense, what they said was, well, we didn't jack up the price. We just showed them higher price values first, on page 1, and then lower price on the second page. So I'm telling you, marketers, these guys know how to target you. So if you think you're getting a good deal, do your research, because otherwise, if you just think, oh, this is a great deal, you're going to lose. This is very common, especially when stores are in need for sales. 0% interest on balance transfers, right? You get this all the time, or you go to a furniture store that says 0% for 12 months. Good deal or bad deal? How many think it's a good deal? Raise your hands. Good deal. Okay. How many think it's a bad deal? 0% financing. So again, I think it's going to depend where you are in this. But my feeling is, unless you really know what you're doing, right? You can say, you know what, I can use that 0%. I can take cash out of this and invest it in something else, and but now you're playing a game, right? Now you're saying, I can manipulate the system by taking cash out of here and earning 5% here, and then I can pay them back. That's very risky. But I told you, people who are successful always take risks, right? So, but it's a hit or miss kind of thing. The reason why it's bad is actually, and this is actually true, what they found is that people who, and this is why they target this, people who take advantage of these 0% 12-month deals end up actually, anyone know what the caveat is to these deals? If you don't pay your balance back in 12 months, you have to pay the interest from the beginning, and guess what those interest rates are? They're in the 25% range. So now all of a sudden you're in the 12th month, and you have a balance of $5,000, No way that you can pay off that balance. And not only do you have to pay off that $5,000, but you have to pay off all the interest that went with it. The research suggests that people who fall for this kind of stuff actually declare bankruptcies at a higher rate than those who don't. So again, when you see a deal, unless you think you really know the deal, don't fall for it. Getting a flagship phone on the day, like yeah, so iPhone 7 was released last week, and people were rushing. They were sold out immediately. That's a bad deal because that same phone, 2 months from now, is going to be given away basically. They'll 2-year commitment. They'll say just give us $200 and take it. Extended warranties on electronics. I'm not big on this. Some people are. It kind of depends on your level of comfort, where you are, how long that thing you think it's going to last, because electronics changes very quickly. And if you think your TV is going to last you 10 years, I guess you can buy that extended warranty. But most of the times you're always recycling these things. This is a good one. It happens all the time in January. Exercise machines like treadmills, stationaries, and all that. Good deal or bad deal to buy them, or gym memberships. It's actually, again, research shows people give up on these things very quickly, whether it's a gym membership or these exercise machines. They use it the first few days, and then it becomes like a laundry, hanging clothes thing. So if you really want to go in that direction, start by just doing a walk first, right? Commit yourself to the time, then go for these kind of things. Refinancing homes, good deal or bad deal? If you're riding the wave upwards, it's a good deal, but as soon as the market crashes and you're stuck with that refinancing, it's a bad deal, right? So you're taking a risk when you do that. People think, I can pay off lower interest rates and all that stuff. Anyway, so some data here. Americans carry on average $15,000 of debt. That's an average American household, actually. $15,000 of debt. That's credit card debt, not housing or big time. That's credit card, household debt. Most Americans have almost 4 active cards that they use, okay? And why do they need 4 cards? Because they've maxed out on the other 3. And 29% have no cards at all. So quickly, tips on how to eliminate credit card debt. Make budget and stick to it. Pay off balance with the highest interest terms first. Use cash. Don't worry about reward points. That's another thing, right? Reward points. How many of us fall for that? Oh, I'll make this purchase and get back 2%, or I'll get a trip or something, right? We all do it, but why did you have to make that purchase in the first place? You don't think about that, right? But it's, again, marketers, they've figured out the consumer, what they like, and what, those impulse decisions they'll make. Use cash, stop watching TV, okay? That's the biggest waste, because if you don't know the product is out there, you won't be tempted to buy it. If you're, it's a joke. If you're browsing, install ad blockers so that you don't get targeted. But then pay the company, if it's a news site, pay them subscription. Don't make impulse decisions. We do this all the time, right? We walk into a store for something, we walk into a store to buy batteries, and we're like, oh, this is a good laptop, I'll buy this too, right? So you walk in the store for $10, you walk out with a $1,000 purchase. This is a very common thing. And of course, that's what those flyers that you get in the mail, that's what they're for. They want to bring you in, and then they want to sell you everything else. All right, the other thing quickly again is diet, okay? This is one of the easiest things you can do to manage your budget. Just reduce the amount of food you take, eat healthy, and you'll notice, eliminate like sugars and other things from your regular diet. What did I say, what else? Healthy, you save on medical bills, right? Imagine if you're eating healthy, sugars, okay. Drink lots of water. By the way, whenever you're feeling hungry and you feel like, I just ate, but I'm still hungry, drink water. It works. It's all about, your mind thinking that you're not full yet. Again, used cars. So there's so many factors here. I think we have a couple of people who are in this business. New cars lose 20% of the value within a year. So if you think, I have a $60,000 car, a year later you don't. And this is another gimmick, 72-month payments. Don't do it, because, again, if you don't pay back the loan, you'll default and other issues. New, used, luxury, utility, public transportation, like Uber, hail riding, ownership costs. You have a lot of factors you have to consider, and then you can make a better decision. And sometimes it may be better not to even own a car. If you actually do the analysis, you might realize that you don't even need a car. So I just want to quickly, why do you want to rent versus mortgage? A lot of factors go into this as well. But one thing that's interesting is that since 1983, the average home size in America has increased, which means the price of homes have increased, and of course that means we've incurred more debt. So be careful when you buy these homes. A lot of people say, I'm not buying it for the size of the home, I'm buying it for the school or closer. But in reality, we know we're paying a premium for bigger, higher quality homes. All right, eliminate bad habits. Okay, so this is all these things that we do, we don't even realize it. Everything from cigarettes, lottery, sugar, soda, fast foods, wasting food, bottled water. Yeah, exactly. There's really no need for this, unless if you were talking here, then you need this. But a glass would have worked as well, tap water. In fact, a lot of companies here, they just recycle tap water and sell it to you in a bottle, and it's a waste of plastic and your money. Yeah, don't buy these latest gadgets. There really isn't a need for that. And avoid bank fees like ATM fees, overdraft fees, all these. It's not worth it. Just manage, maintain your bank balance, and you'll be fine. All right, got to quickly move on. Avoid scams. Okay, it's not. So the perception is that elderly fall for scams quickly, or more likely to fall. But data actually suggests that the elderly are smart because they've sort of gone through the cycle. They don't fall for this. But a lot of people do. Tax scams are very common, right? Someone will call you up saying, "We're from the IRS. You owe us, $10,000, but if you pay right now, only $500 for you." And you're like, "Oh yeah, sure. Here's my credit card, $500." And now all of a sudden you're out $500 because that guy was just scamming you. Lottery scams. You won $1 million, but just send us $100 for the processing fee, and we'll send you the check. And guess what? You're not getting $1 million. A whole bunch of the basic principle here is if it's too good to be true, it's false. Who's likely to get scammed? And you can see the actual the age at the bottom. I don't know if you can read it, but that spike in the middle is the 25 to 34-year age group. They're the most likely to get scammed. Okay, rainy day fund. Okay, so this is our savings as since 1969. Okay, and what do you see? The trend in savings going down. It's only gone up recently after the 2008 crash, but even then it's very low compared to other countries. Other countries like China, India, even England, they save at a much higher rate than Americans do, and that of course has an impact because if you don't, one mistake again, even a health issue can cause ruin. So the idea is basically focus on trying to get a a savings, and the way to do that is to actually create goals. Right, goals are important. Eliminate one, just do one thing, and focus on it, and make sure you save it in a separate jar. Whether it's like candy, if you're in the habit of or having lunch or whatever it is, right? Eliminate that and put that savings, and then you'll see at the end of the month or whatever. Hopefully, you're meeting your goal. Family entertainment, right? So this is always like my kids, right? Someone asked the question. My kids are always asking me, right? Blah blah blah. The point here is that if you spend time with the family, they'll appreciate that more than any gift that you can buy them, right? If your kid says, I need to buy brand new shoes or whatever, I need to buy this, brand name shoes or toys or whatever, just spend time with them, and that's good enough. And most of them will appreciate that. In fact, I was going to do this exercise, but I'm running out of time. As I was leaving my house yesterday, I was saying goodbye, to my son. He was 7 years old. He was giving me a hug, and he came to me. He said, "Wait, Dad, 1 second." He went in his room, and he got this coin that's worth less than the penny or something. It's just a toy gold coin. And he said, "Dad, keep this in case you need to spend it on something. You can use this to buy it." And I was like, what? That for me is the lasting memory. And believe me, when you do those kind of small things for your kids, your wife, they'll appreciate that just as much. If there was, most of you know Brother Yusuf the thief, who's passed away. He told me the story once that when he was a child, his parents were so poor that they couldn't afford to buy him toys. One Christmas, they gave him a drum set, and he realized the drum set was made out of cardboard boxes with toothpicks or some twigs that he found, that their parents found, and that was the drum set he got. He said to this day he was Emmy winner, whatever, world-renowned musician. He said, to me, that drum set is worth more than anything else I've ever received in my life. And so that, I'm telling you, sometimes we feel like, we're not doing enough for our kids, but spending time, doing something with them is worth a lot more. Okay, so this is the question that someone asked, my wife spends too much, kids want this and that, the whole thing. Bottom line is, they're looking at you. What is your pattern of behavior, right? If you're smoking, if you're playing lottery, if you're buying the latest gadget, you're buying clothes, you're wasting money on cars, and then your wife says, I want to buy clothes, and you say no, that's going to be trouble, right? But if you're the one who's actually controlling your own budget and every once in a while spending on the family, they will never complain about your, what you give them. So, just realize that. Okay. Speaking of needs, I think it's out of order. My son asked me the other day, he said he needs to have this Pokemon card. I don't know what Pokemon is. Sorry. But I looked it up. It's $20,000 for this card. I said, yeah, that's a need that you will fulfill when you start earning. All right, other investments, I don't have time to go into that. I just want to quickly go this. Yeah, avoid gadgets. Okay, this is the part where there's a whole sector of economists that say that, again, as an individual, no matter what you do, the macro system will always ruin your life. So, basically the system is stacked against you, and we realize that it's actually data. If you look at the data, it's definitely true. So the idea is that there's so many factors, everything from income, your work, your mortgage rates, college tuition, rents, auto expenses. You have no control over that. So why even bother? But obviously you can't just ignore it. You have to think about it though. All right, last thing, last two slides. So the question here is, what about chanda, right? Is it an investment, expense, or an obligation, right? I was going to ask people to this, and I completely, mismanaged. I'm telling you, I wasn't the right person to do this, right? So all three: expense, investment, and obligation. So that's one way to look at it. And of course, some people might say it's investment, right? You give chanda now, Allah Ta'ala has guaranteed you 700 times reward. So that's investment, and that's a guarantee that you can believe in, right? I told you if it's something too good to be true, don't believe it. But I think when Allah Ta'ala says it, you should believe it. So I think most people recognize that chanda is investment. It's also an obligation that we should honor, because that's really we talked about the Maslow hierarchy. That's really at the top there, right? That once you've recognized what is the meaning of life, kind of, have I sort of realized where I am in life? This should be part of that. Last slide. And this is an interactive discussion, but wasiyat as a solution, okay? So why is wasiyat, wait a second, you just talked about reducing cost and all this stuff, and now you're saying give 10% of your wealth to the Jamaat. Here's the thing, right? By giving 10%, it forces you into that smaller window, right? So think about those extra purchases that you make. Secondly, when you only have 90%, when you're living 90% of your income, when there is a fluctuation in your income, right? Let's say you lose a job, or you're demoted, or something happens, you're between jobs, you can easily manage that fluctuation because you're already living within your means, less within your means. It forces you to think about those wasteful purchases, right? And then finally, it doesn't give you the capacity to follow the Joneses. So just because your neighbor bought something expensive, you don't have to buy it expensive because you don't have the same capacity he does. And others will benefit from your wisdom. And that's the other problem, that why are we a consumer economy? Because we think that by having these goods, we're somehow better than someone else, right? If you see someone driving expensive luxury car, what's the automatic assumption? That this guy's made it, right? This guy's whatever decisions he's made in life, very successful, because look at the car he's driving, or look at the home he's driving. So that's the association that we've been forced into. But the reality is that we don't know what kind of, quote unquote, hell he's living in with those good things. And again, you read about these, suicides and depression and all this stuff. It's because of this kind of lifestyle. And finally, of course, there are blessings in that. So I know my time is up. I apologize for, what was the hardest word in the dictionary? Not for me. I can say sorry anytime I want, because I truly am sorry for going over time. But I appreciate the attention. And reach out to me if anything wasn't clear, if you wanted some more data points on any of those things. Jazakallah.
रोशनी का सफर